This is a Power 98.7 podcast. Now we're talking. There's more on power987.co.za.
I'm Tuminsang Ndlovu. Thank you for listening to this Power Update podcast.
The day's top stories on the Power Update with Tuminsang Ndlovu.
It's almost 12:47. We now look at the Constitutional Court judgment on corporal punishment used in the household. The Apex Court has found that beating or smacking, whichever one you want to call it, when disciplining children in the home is unlawful. Clinical psychologist Thabang Tlaka speaks to us about this. Thank you so much for your time. Let's start by asking about the negative effects of beating or smacking a child in the privacy of one's home, because this is exactly where the conversation started.
Good afternoon to me, Sang. Well, beating a child, you actually, the intent is that you're trying to help the child, but the effect is that you're actually teaching a child how to be violent. You're teaching them that if the one person is stronger than the other one, then they can have their way. You're teaching them how not to regulate their emotions, how to deal with situations effectively. So that would be more on the negative side. Your intentions might be good, but the effect is detrimental actually to the child.
Let's look at the South African psyche then. We ask questions around this so many times, and we are a violent nature with a violent history. What happened prior to 94 was very violent, and we grew up in society where smacking was guaranteed. You don't come back home dirty and you think you're going to get a nice smile or a naughty corner. But the question I'm really asking is, how do we now turn back that way of thinking, especially if we are being told by a court?
Remember, everything we know now, much of what we know we learned somewhere. That also means it's something that we can unlearn. So we used to do things in the past. What we need to do is just then make an effort to find other ways of disciplining, because the criticism is usually that, well, the government, the constitution says that we can't now hit the children are out of order, but they don't give us alternatives. So I think the job now is to relearn or unlearn the negatives and then find then better ways of then disciplining children.
Has it ever been proven that a smack can bear positive results?
Yes, in fact, they've done studies. They've done studies where children who get they respond in a certain way. And if you ask a typical, we don't even have to go to literature to even ask that. Most people can't remember the last time they either got a hiding. And people like saying, look, I got a smack, look how well I turned out. You could even ask the question, but what kind of country are we living in? So we must ask then deeper questions about smacking, because what you're trying to do is actually just educate the child. So there's a difference between hurting the child and trying to correct a certain behavior.
Let's talk about that difference then, because that's where the fine line lies. One could, it's open to interpretation, because a mild smack, to me, may be a beating to someone else.
Exactly. So good question, because we must ask ourselves, the reality is this: most parents who are disciplining their children, I'll put it in inverted commas, they are usually doing it when they are angry, frustrated, just wanting the child to behave in a certain way. So we must make a distinction between mistakes, curiosity, and willful acts of disobedience. And then there are much more effective ways of getting the desired result from a child. So love goes with discipline. So definitely we have to discipline, but it doesn't necessarily equate to hitting. You could take away things. You could reward. So literature tells us, done experiments, that when you reward good behavior tends to follow. So you can reward certain behaviors. You can give time out. You can have certain boundaries. But if you also will allow me, so discipline works better in this way.
Yeah.
If somebody does something wrong, right, you do it promptly, so you don't wait like our parents used to count. They'll tell you that the cow has, the adder has 4 things, so they have to count these 4. So when it's prompt, so when the mistake occurs, you discipline. It has to be consistent. It has to be accompanied by an explanation. You can't discipline a child for something you didn't explain. It's like being fired at work without being told what the rules are. And the very, very important, it has to be disciplined by somebody who has a warm relationship with the child.
I see.
If you don't have a good relationship with the child, you're not the one to discipline the child, because they don't understand you hurting them and you trying to discipline them. So it's much more effective if you explain. Remember, we had a conversation about this, and you and I agreed that the consequence would be this. Because I love you, this is what we're going to do. And afterwards, you explain that this is what we had to do because I love you. And, so it has to go that way. When you are calm and you can explain properly to the child.
Sure, Thabang, who are the T's and C's? And I'll tell you a very personal story. I never used to be much of a smacker, but I ended up becoming one because I was the I love you, let's explain, let's talk, and you get arrogance. But then there's also a psyche that my parents would probably relate to, that children post-apartheid have too many rights, in inverted commas. How vital is it then for society to be on one page on this matter?
Yeah, remember, I'll even just help us a little bit as a group. And you can see this between us Africans and the Western culture. And part of what we struggle with is assertiveness and confidence, because part of that is beaten out of us.
Yes.
Because when you disagree, you need to learn to be angry at your parents. And why you want to do that is that then when you have a problem, you can talk to them. So it talks to how you learn to regulate your emotions. Then you can deal with frustrating situations. We have a situation in our country where people beat people because they can't sit and articulate a problem or regulate their emotions. So children these days will not accept the discipline of old days, because children are taught to be critical. They're taught to have a voice. And that is what we want. We want children who be able to say they're upset when they're upset. Otherwise, they'll confuse. When things are not right, they'll keep quiet because they've been taught, if you don't like something, if somebody has more strength than you, more power than you, more money than you, they can do whatever they want. So you want children to be able to voice out their. They don't have more rights. We've moved on as a society.
Please
we know better. We must just be willing to shift and learn. And it does work, and it's proven. It's proven that if you choose better ways of engaging with the children, you actually have better relationships with your adult children. If you don't do it that way, you and your adult children go separating. They pretend in front of you there are other people when they're outside.
Nyara Leboga, we've learned a bit there. Thank you very much for your input. That's clinical psychologist Thabang Tlaka.
You've been listening to a Power 98.7 podcast. For more podcasts, visit power987.co.za or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.